Starting now, we are recording. Just be aware of that. I hope that's okay with everybody. But let me thank you all for attending. This is one of our webinar series presentations. We're going to be doing these now about every other month or so. It seems to be working out. The last one we did was an overview of the new 8.1 release. So we have a number of topics that we think would be good for a webinar environment like this. So if you guys have ideas on what other topics might be good for our webinar series, please send me an email and we'll add them onto the list. So this one's about denials, good old denials, the dirty word denials. It's really not a dirty word. Basically, it means somebody, an engineer, logs in, tries to get a license, and I can't get a license. So the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, oh, we need more licenses, and you might even go out and buy a license, more licenses. And as you know, some of these licenses are really expensive. So I hope after the seminar you realize that you don't have to necessarily go out and buy more licenses just because you get a denial. We're going to talk mostly about Flex denial reporting. FlexLM does record denials in the Flex debug log. That's the only place that we can get denial information. And a denial gets recorded each time that an engineer attempts to get a license and is refused. Each type of denial has a unique denial code. So this is going to be important to look at when you're trying to figure out are they true denials or false denials. We're going to talk mostly about FlexLM, but we do also support denial reporting for reprise licenses and for DSLS license types. Why do you get denials? Well, obviously the one that's most important, which we call a true denial, is one where you've already reached capacity, no licenses are available. That's what we're really looking for. But you can get denials for rules violations. User is not allowed a license on this particular server, or spurious requests for a feature or license that doesn't exist, or a denial can be generated by a clever engineer who has written scripts to quickly repeat calls for a license. And some of you know what I'm talking about here. And these guys can write scripts that can call for a license every 10 seconds. So if it takes them, 3 or 4 minutes to get a license, guess how many denials you just recorded? So we have to be on the lookout. We have to realize that this can happen, and it can distort, our view of denials. So, and there are ways of finding this. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is a chart that lists out different denial types, an explanation of the denials, and then is it a true denial or no? So the true denial is the one where all licenses have been checked out. But you can have denials for all licenses are reserved for somebody else, a checkout request rejected by a vendor-defined checkout filter. That could be maybe in an option file. Features have expired, license XX support not enabled, license file does not support this version, no such feature exists, the user host on exclude list for a feature. That can be, these are typically in the option files as well, exclude lists or include, not in the include list, could be another reason for denials. So we need a way to filter out these kind of denials because these are the ones that we really care about, these true denials. So some considerations when you're looking at denial reports. One is the type of denial and how many denials. Obviously, we're looking for these kind of denials and how many. Are you getting 10 an hour, or are you getting 10 a week? That's going to make a difference in how you react to the denials. The frequency of the denials, the resolution speed, which resolution speed means here, if a license gets a denial, an engineer gets a denial, but he's able to obtain a license, say within 20 minutes or an hour, that might be okay. So you also want to consider how quick does a license become available. And you're also going to be wondering things like, is somebody camping on licenses so that they're not available? And that's what will inevitably happen if you get engineers to the point where they can't get a license. They're going to start hoarding licenses and camping on licenses so that they always have one when they need it. So we have to be on the lookout for all of these things when you're considering denials. Again, the other issue is, are you getting a lot of false denials or repetitious denials, and can they be eliminated? Can you identify who's doing it? And there's certainly reports in our system that you'll be able to use to identify these kinds of repetitious denials. And if you can eliminate them, that might dramatically cut back on the number of denials. A serious consideration, of course, is how expensive is it to just add another license. That could be a major factor. And then what is an acceptable denial rate? I don't think any company can tolerate necessarily zero denials. I mean, you don't want to have so many licenses that you never get a denial, but yet you don't want to have so few that you're getting too many denials. So what you'll need to establish for your company and actually for each different tool, what is an acceptable denial rate? 1 per day, is that okay? 10 per week, is that okay? I don't know the answer to that question, but you need to think about that. When you're trying to decide, do you have too many denials? Do you need more licenses? That kind of thing. You have to realize also that denial reports by themselves are not the answer. They're not the only thing that you're going to look at. Denials are only a piece of the puzzle. So you're certainly going to look at the denial reports. You're going to look at the history graph. Those of you that already have the LAM-UM are familiar with the term history graph, but you want to know how often are you hitting max and is there a trend. So this is a history graph, and the red line is your capacity for a given time frame. How many times do you actually hit the capacity line? That might be an indicator of whether you and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting denials just because you're hitting the max at some times, but you do want to know how often do you hit max. The trend line here can be looked at over a long period, and you get some idea whether your usage is trending upward or downward. But you do want to take a look at the history graph and see how many times you're hitting max. Concurrency graphs. Now, this is a very key report because it does give you some measure of what is acceptable. What is an acceptable level of capacity usage? So in this concurrent use graph, we own 10 licenses. That's our capacity. And in this time period, this tool was at max 1.3% of the time. That's how you read this report. These are all percentages at a specific level of concurrent checkout. So capacity is 10. During this time period, we were there only 1.3% of the time. As it turns out, this is also the probability of a denial. So there's only a 1.3% chance that you're going to get a denial with this level of capacity here. Our research and best practices suggest that you can tolerate up to 5% probability of denial up here, maybe even higher. Your company, you might want to say 10% is an acceptable probability level. You'll need to determine that for yourself, and again, for each tool. Maybe some tools you can tolerate a higher probability of denial than on a lesser CAD tool. But let's say that your limit is 5%, and you're looking at this and you're saying, well, we only reach capacity 1.3% of the time. This sort of suggests that you can actually get rid of some licenses. In this scenario here, you could probably get rid of 3 licenses and still be under your 5% probability. Now, you're going to want to look at this at different time periods. This is only a 1-month time period here, but you might want to look at this, over a 3-month or a 6-month time period and evaluate what is the probability of a denial, looking at your concurrent use graphs and looking at these percentage numbers here. And then you need to establish what is an acceptable percent probability of denial. Again, I'm assuming everything is clear. If you have questions, just jump in. This is another graph that also is useful in making decisions about whether you need more licenses. Regardless of how many denials you're getting, looking at the heat map can give you a sense of usage efficiency. So in this scenario here, you're getting the most checkouts at this day and time of the week. So this happens to be a 1 month view of a tool, SolidWorks, used Monday through Friday, 24 hours a day. And the light blue is no use, or the dark blue is no usage, and that fades into yellow, red. Dark red is the day and time when denials may occur. This graph does not show denials occurring. I'll show you another one in a minute that does. But this graph does not necessarily imply that there are denials occurring at that dark red spot there. That just means that that's the most intense checkout activity. And you're going to have to reference some of your other reports to see how close is that to actually reaching denials or not. I don't know. So this is a relative graph. It just shows the most intense usage is here. If you really want to see denials, then we have the other reports, which we're going to talk about, but we do have a heat map that shows denials now. This is an 8.1, and it'll actually physically or visually show you the day of the week and the time of the day when you're getting denials. And again, it depends on the denials that you're tracking. What's it say? I have a chat note here. Let me see what Roland was asking here. Hold on a second. Is this heat map graph only good for 1 week? There are only 7 days listed. I mean, you can have a heat map for any time period you want. Generally speaking, a heat map has to be at least, whoops, I don't want to leave the meeting. You don't want to do a heat map for less than 7 days. It wouldn't make sense because this is a 7-day, 24/7 type of graph. So I don't know if that answers Roland's question or not. But so you can pick any time frame you want. This happens to be a 30-day time frame, and this was a 30-day time frame right here. So the heat maps should be consulted. The averages report, I don't know if you guys even are aware of this, but there is a report under the history tab that's called averages. And the averages report gives you a list of everything used during a selected time period. This happens to be last 7 days.
7 days. Guy?
Yes.
Guy?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jeff. I don't want to get too deep into this. I just wanted to ask, when you're launching the denials heat map, where were you launching that from?
I'll show you. I'll actually show you a live demo in a minute.
Okay, great, because I'm trying to launch it from the denials tab and it's not launching for me. So that's fine. I'll wait for the demo, and I don't want to get into troubleshooting. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah. Okay. And you have to be at a certain level, 8.1 as well.
Yes.
Okay. Average.
8.1.
The averages report shows you a number of things, that all features used during a period of time, in this case last 7 days, how many you own, total usage time of that feature in the last 7 days, average usage per checkout, average number of users, and then how many times it hit max. So this again is a factor here that you might want to consider when you're talking about denials. So the only time you're going to get a denial is when you're at max. So you might want to consider what is an acceptable number for a given time period. And again, this is a nice little chart here because it also references a specific tool. So, MATLAB, we had 6 max, based on our capacity of 20. We actually hit max 6 times. Is that an acceptable? Maybe it's 10 level is acceptable. Maybe 5 is acceptable. I don't know, but you should consider, what is a maximum, what is an acceptable level of max hits on your capacity. And that's from the history averages graph. We also have the combined graph. If you have the same tool running on multiple license servers, like some of you do, this particular graph also shows you capacity and actual, based on, we only have 2 different servers here, different colors, but then black is the total. So again, similar here to the history graph, you want to note how many times did you hit max with the total of the two license servers combined. So this shows usage versus capacity for each tag plus a total. So the question is, how often does total hit max? Should you move licenses? So you might see that, oh, you're hitting max a lot on the blue server, but the red server you're not. So maybe you can move some licenses from the blue to the red. But you also want to take a look at this total combined first and make sure that you're not exceeding the total. Or totals hitting max that often. But again, this chart, yep.
Hi, this is Mark Rothe. Question about this graph here. It specifically says multiple servers. I've got a situation where I've got two different features for what is actually the same product, but because Autodesk puts them together the way they do, or I should say separates them, since they were bought at different times, can I run this chart looking at two different features on the same server?
Yeah, that's a different. That's a different. It's called the multiple feature graph. That's a different graph, and we're talking about denials here, so that doesn't really fit in with what I'm referring to here. This is the same tool running on multiple license servers.
Okay.
So if you don't have that, okay. Moving right along here. So this is some of the nuances of reporting denials, not just, in our tool, but in all tools. So to get denial information, we have to get to the Flex debug log and parse it periodically. So what does that mean? Well, it means A, the Flex debug log must exist for each tag. So if there's a certain tag or tool that you want to track denials on, you must first ensure that a Flex debug log is being created for that tool on that tag. So a Flex debug log is per tag, right? And a tool is embedded within a tag. I don't know if that makes sense, but so you need to make sure that sometimes we work with customers who want us to help them set up denials, and we find out there is no Flex debug log. It hasn't been set up yet. You have to work with your license administrator or maybe Flexera or whoever to make sure that the Flex debug log exists for that tool. Secondly, we need to be able to get to that Flex debug log from the LAMUM server. So there's got to be a path from the LAMUM server to that Flex debug log, and that path has to be open to us. And that means that you can't have firewalls or permission issues, because if we can't get to the Flex debug log, we can't parse it, and if we can't parse it, we can't collect denial data, in which case you're not going to get denial reports. There are other considerations around Flex debug logs. It's sort of a monster, or it can be, if you don't manage them properly. So first, there are size restrictions. You don't want to parse a debug log that has grown to 10 gigabytes every night. So you must be concerned about the size of the debug log, and there's no need to parse the same data over and over and over again. So you must limit the size of the debug log, and that requires some kind of a rotation schedule so that a new debug log is started weekly or monthly, whatever schedule you decide on, and we can help you decide that, but you do need to be concerned about that. Now, if there are problems accessing the debug log remotely because of firewalls or permission issues, many of our customers are required to set up a cron or a script to make a copy of that remote debug log and move that copy to a local file that we can get to, usually on the LAMUM server. And you run that maybe every night or once every 3 days or whatever, so that a fresh copy is rotated into the local drive. The other thing you need to set up is a parsing frequency and time interval. So do you want these log files parsed daily, weekly, monthly? And then what time of the day is it going to, or night I should say, is it going to parse? Usually we suggest set it up so it parses in the middle of the night, 12 o'clock at night. And then if you keep those debug logs size to a reasonable amount, it won't take too long to parse it, and then the data will automatically be in there. But in our system, you can certainly set up the frequency and the time, and I'll show you that in a minute. So let's talk more about the path to the Flex debug log. So as I mentioned earlier, each tag, which is a ported host, has its own unique Flex debug log. and an associated path to get there. The path is from the Lam server to that FlexDebug log. Each tool line item in Lam, therefore, needs to have a place to put the absolute path from the Lam server to the FlexDebug log, and that's in, if you know, this is the license detail page where you're putting in a new license or you're editing an existing license in Lam, and there's a box down here. It's called log file, and that box has to have the absolute path from the Lam server to the FlexDebug log, wherever it is. If it's local, it's going to be a real short path. If it's remote and you can get to it, it's probably going to be a long path. But in order to verify that the path is good and that we can see the debug log, there's a test button here. So after you put that path in there, you want to hit test and see if it turns red or green. If it turns green, it means we found it and we can parse it. If it's red, it means we can't find it. It either doesn't exist, or the path isn't right, or there are permission problems, or something else is going on. So sometimes it does take a little bit of going back and forth, maybe even with IT, to get these debug logs set up so that you can parse them, so we can pull denial information out for your reports. So this is sort of, again, repeating the same thing. If the FlexDebug log is not directly accessible from Lam, a copy must be periodically created and put in a folder on the Lam server. And then you need to create, or somebody needs to create, a cron that will do this periodically. So it does it automatically. You don't want to be bothered with doing that manually. And then we also talked about FlexDebug logs needed to be rotated, restarted periodically. Parsing a super huge debug log takes a long time, probably has exactly the same data in it, and it's not recommended. There's no reason to do it. So what is a good rotation schedule? Probably weekly or monthly. I mean, you could do it daily if you want. It's totally up to you. But normally you want to make sure that you parse around the time or just before or just after the rotation occurs. I hope I'm not losing anybody here. So in the Lam side of the tool, when you want to set up denials, probably besides putting in the path and getting a green light here, the next step would be to put in the time of the day and how frequently you want that debug log to get parsed for denials. And that's under the parsers tab. There's one there that says Flex Denial Parsing Setup. And that's all you really need to do here is put in the time of the day and the frequency of the parsing. And I mentioned this, parsing frequency has to be less than or equal to rotation frequency. Does that make sense? Okay, let's look at some denial reports inside of our tool. We have denials by tag, which is ported host. We have denials overview, which is across all tags. We have denials by user, and we have the denials heat map. And because some of these reports can take a while to generate, and you don't need this data necessarily on demand, or you don't need it that frequently, denial reports make good weekly, monthly, or quarterly batch reports. So again, in our system, to create a batch report, it's pretty straightforward. You just create the report once, and then you save it as a batch report for that time period, you know, be it weekly or monthly. And you'll get these reports regularly. Now I'm going to go live. Before we go live to the product, and I'll show you each of these reports separately. Does anybody have any questions on anything we've covered so far? Wow.
None here.
Question? Go ahead.
No, none here.
Oh, none here. None here. Okay.
None here.
Okay, let's keep going then. So I'm going to get out of the here and go to my browser. Now I'm using Internet Explorer. You can use Chrome or Firefox, as you all know. But this is the typical chart. So the first one we're going to look at is the denials by tag. And so these are all the different tags. These are all unique tags. And then this is the denials column. So it's pretty straightforward. And in my demo, I really only have denials under that. So you're going to get a list of features at that tag. And then we only care about, in this case, I want to see denials for this tool. And so this report comes up. It's the tool and the tag up here. And this happens to be 365 days because in my demo, we only did denials, Flex debug logs for these 2 months. So, I mean, in your case, again, you would have a list of these that you could choose from. But let's just look at June because we had 136 denials in June. And if I click on that, it brings up the weeks. And then if I click on the weeks, it brings up the days. And so you can drill right in to a specific day. So that's this report. I'm just showing you one type of report. You can drill in by day. So on this day, you know, these particular people, this is the day right here. These are the people that got denied. It shows you the time of the denial, the date of the denial, the machine that they got denied on, and the error code. I'm going to talk about this error code quite a bit because this is the one that you can zero in on the true denials. So the one that the error code that we want is the one that says license number of users already reached. That's the true denial. And you're going to see in your list different denial codes, different reasons for the denials. Like I showed you in the presentation, there was all kinds of reasons you can get a denial. But the one that we really care about is this one right here. So we can filter on that just because you're going to get a list. In this example, we only have that one 4342 error code. But in your case, you have a drop down and it might have several different error codes. And the one you want to click on is the 4342. That's the true denial error code. You can also filter on, you know, other things here if you want to see a particular engineer. How many denials did he get? McLaren, he got 2 denials. So you can look at this and drill in to the detail that you want. And of course, this is all you know, a table in our system, and all tables in our system can be. You can click on the column heading. You know, if you want, you can also export any table to Excel. This could be dumped out to Excel like it is. And so if this is a tool, also you can create batch reports from here. So if this is a tool, oh yeah, I like this batch report. This happens to be this happens to be a 1 year report. This is a 1 day report. You wouldn't do a batch report on that, but you can do it on other reports. I'll show you in a minute. So that's denials by tag, and you can do a lot with this report if you want. Now, if you want, you can also do denials overview across all tags. So this is all the denials across all the tags that had denials. In this case, we only had 2 tags, and we had 5 features that had denials on them in the last. This happens to be a last year. And again, you have the same ability here. If I wanted to drill in on the NX 13100N, I can do the details, zero in, and drill down to get whatever information I want that way. So that's it. That's the overview. So you might want to do this one on a weekly basis. Now, I only had a couple of, I'm not going to get any data. If I try to do a 90-day report, it's going to be 0. Well, I do get some MATLAB denials within the last 90 days. But this is, again, coming from debug logs. So I can drill in on this one as well. That's denials by overview. So we got denials by tag. We got denials across all tags. And then we have denials by users. So in this example, you want to see a particular user and how many denials they got. So if you click, let's do a Foyt. And I want to see how many denials a Foyt got. Well, over the last 365 days, he got 121 denials on different tools. But if you wanted, again, filter on a specific tool, you know, or you can use this box up here. Let's say you only want to see NX stuff. So you can see that this is changing. So these are different tools that a Foyt this is all AFOID, but this is showing everything that he got denied on. And again, you can filter on this 4342 error code if you like to find out what's true, what's a true denial. So this is by user. So you can, if you have somebody that's really, really complaining, you know, B. McLaren is constantly complaining, you know, about getting denied, you can look more specifically at B. McLaren's denials and find out what, when, and how he's getting denied. What machine is he getting denied on? And then lastly, denials heat map. So again, here you do heat maps by tag. So let's do MATLAB. I'm not sure if there's any. Yeah, okay, so this is a heat map, 7-day heat map for MATLAB showing a denial occurred here on Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning and Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that's not too bad. And again, you can change the time period and look at it that way if you like. So this is, now why is this important? Because it shows you exactly when the denials are occurring. And you could use this along with other graphs to find out, you know, do you need more licenses or not? So those are denials by heat map, and they're all right here. So I'm not sure why you're not seeing denial. There could be reasons why you're not seeing a denials heat map. Might be because there are no denials. It might be because we're not parsing the Flex debug log. I'm not sure. Or maybe in that time frame there were no denials. You know, if you do 7 days, there maybe not, but in 90 days there was. I don't know. So again, my point, going back over to the slides again, was that denials make pretty good weekly, monthly, quarterly batch reports. But again, it depends on having the Flex debug logs available and parsing them regularly, getting them into the right place. You know, all these requirements have to be met in order to get denial reports. And then once you are getting denial reports, you have to consider these reports along with, you know, all these other ones that we talked about earlier to see, you know, do you really need more licenses or not? So don't make decisions on buying more licenses just on these reports. They have to be put into context. And as I said, they're all pieces of the puzzle. I did that. So, and I already showed you this a couple of times. Just make sure that when you're looking at the denial tables, you really want to filter out, you want to filter just for the true denials, the 4342 error code. I mean, all these other ones that we talked about way up here, you know, they all have different error codes, but this is the 4342 one. That's the one that you really care about. Reducing denials. How can you reduce denials? Well, one is if you know that you're getting repeat denials from one person through call scripts, you need to eliminate them. So identify the person that's doing it and try to eliminate it. If you can't, at least put that into the formula that this guy is generating, you know, 30 denials an hour, you know, and we can't consider that in our decision. So obviously the best thing is to eliminate the repetitive calls. The other thing you can do, we'll talk about giving the dashboard out. I think if you give this dashboard out, and I'll talk more about this in a second, I think the need for this goes away. Engineers do this because, you know, they just want to be there when a license becomes available. But if they have the access to this dashboard, the paradigm changes, and I think this might go away. I just saw a chat come up there. The question was, can you filter the heat map graph on 4342 denial code? And I don't think so. Alfred, are you there? I don't know if Alfred's on the call yet or not, but I think it's just showing the total denials that are in the database for that date and time for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you on that, Roland. How do you close that? There we go. So eliminate the repetitive call scripts if they're generating excessive denials. Monitor for long checkouts, and you do that with the current checkout overview and the current checkout gas gauge displays. I mean, you'll see if you have long checkouts in there. If you go to the current checkout details, you will see if you sort that checkout table by longest to shortest, you'll see if there's somebody that's holding out a license. And if you can eliminate that situation, you free up licenses, could reduce the number of denials. Giving the engineers a dashboard, and the dashboards look like this. Okay, so these are all hyperlinks here to specific reports. These are 8182 hyperlinks. And it's not rocket science. This document can be a SharePoint, it can be Google Docs, it can be a PDF, it can be Word, it can be a PowerPoint. This is a PowerPoint presentation. If I want to know what's the current checkout status of MATLAB, I just click on that link, and this is real time. I didn't do anything magical or anything here. That tells me this is MATLAB, what I just clicked on, and it shows me the current checkout status. Who has it checked out? How long has it been checked out for? So understand something here, that this is sort of self-policing. If engineers can go to that dashboard like that and click and see who has it checked out and for how long they've had it checked out, they're going to be embarrassed if somebody goes in there and sees that they've had it checked out for 4 days, you know. So it sort of self-polices itself. So you can do this for all your key applications. You could have a direct link to any of the key applications and see the current checkout status, as well as these heat maps. So, I mean, here's the heat map for MATLAB. Now, how does this help the engineer? Because he can go to this on demand and he can see when those licenses are being used and when they're not being used. So rather than set up one of these scripts that call for a license every 10 seconds, you know, he can just say, oh, there's plenty of availability. It looks like there's intense usage here and here, but blue is no usage, yellow is moderate usage, and red is more intense usage, and dark red is the only place where there might not be licenses available. So if the engineer knows that, he can stay away from those areas. He's not going to go try to check out a license right here or right here, but any other time he should be able to get a license. So, you know, from my point of view, the dashboard is going to do a lot to reduce denials. And you're going to get better usage. So again, you can do this for any of the different tools. And if you need help setting this up, there's up on our website under resources, there's a whole document about how to set up dashboards. And get these dashboards into the hands of the engineers. And if you need help, you know, with that, please let us know. So that's the dashboard concept, and it's great for the current checkout status. That's the detail on each of the key applications, as well as the heat maps for the key applications. And you could give them access to the denial heat maps as well, both the checkout heat map and the denial heat maps. Those can all be in your dashboard. And then the other thing you can do to try to reduce denials is to automatically warn engineers that have had a license checked out for too long. We do have an alert for long checkouts. You can set it up for, you know, as long as you want. If 8 hours is the longest that anybody should have a license checked out for, you can set it up for 8 hours. And if the person violates that, somebody's going to be notified, and we can send a notification, a warning letter to that person, warning them that, hey, we're watching you and you've exceeded your allowable time limits. Check the license back in, or give us a call, or whatever you want to say in your warning message can be pretty much up to you. And
Guy, that long checkout would make use of the Active Directory or LDAP connection, right?
If you want the warning message to get sent to the user, to the engineer, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, the last thing, and that's why I have this kind of below the line, is if you want to reduce denials, go buy more licenses, right? I mean, that should reduce denials, but you want to try to do everything you can initially to avoid buying new licenses. Another chat message from Roland. Can long checkouts filter out borrowed licenses so users with borrowed licenses don't receive the alerts? Good point. Good question. Some of these I'm going to have to copy down, and we'll have to discuss it. Oh, here, Alfred said, no, heat map graph is for all denial codes. Okay. Alfred, can you answer Roland's question? We'll come back because he'll probably
Yes. Yes. So I just read the question again. If the borrowed licenses are actually recorded in the FlexDebug log, then we can do that.
Oh, that's a good point, because borrowed license information typically comes from the LM stat.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Moving right along here. So anyway, those are some suggestions on how you can reduce denials. I think first you need to find out how big is your denial problem. Is it real or not real? How many true denials are you really getting? How often do they happen? Are they because somebody's got repetitive calls out there? Can you eliminate those? Is it because people are camping on licenses in your environment? Can you eliminate those? And those kind of things. I think that's what you want to do first before you go out and buy more licenses. We talked about that. Now, follow-on help. So there's a lot. We talked about a lot today, and some of it's probably confusing. But I want you'll have this link. I'll make sure that you all get copies of this presentation. So these are just links to a few things. First one is a link to the Team EDA app note that covers Flex Denial parsing, the setup for Flex denials. It's a pretty good document. Take a look at it. It does talk about log file size and rotation and that kind of thing. So that's one piece of help for you. The other is, this is actually from Flexera, and it talks a lot about general concepts about concurrent use licensing and denials and things like that. 4 key concurrent license concepts you should know. I mean, that's sort of what this article is about, and they do talk about denials in that article. And then lastly, if you do want to set up a dashboard, up under resources is this document called Creating a User Dashboard. Again, these links will take you right to these documents, so I would encourage you to do that. And last but not least, if you do need help setting up denials or questions about denial reports, please you can send us an email at support@teameda.com or just call us. So that's pretty much it. We did the whole thing in 45 minutes. I'm available. We are available for questions and answers. Now you can unmute yourselves. No questions? Wow. Or did we lose the GoToMeeting connection?
Well, if I had any question, it would be, you cited Internet Explorer. Is there one browser you support more than others, or they're all equal, and if I have an issue in Chrome, you'll address it. If I have an issue in Firefox, you'll address it.
It's a good question. Who was that? Is that Keith?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I recognized your voice. That's an excellent question, because IE is the one that typically people use, but there are some peculiarities, some subtleties in using IE, and they're all spelled out. You have ActiveX has to be enabled and a few other things. We've had really no problem with Chrome or Firefox. Alfred, do you have any recommendation as far as browsers go?
No, it should work for all of them. But with IE, like you mentioned, a couple of things needs to be done. First, it needs to be a trusted site. You also need to activate your scripting, your script files for JavaScript and all that. So if you don't want to do any of those, you can just use Firefox
or Chrome. Seems to work. Seems to work fine on either Firefox or Chrome, and it does work fine on IE as long as you've got those correct settings.
Right.
Sounds good. Just wanted to make sure they're all supported equally.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, Guy, this is Evelyn Graham. I got one question for you. Moving down the road, does Team EDA have any plans for monitoring subscription licenses, since more CAD programs are going to subscription-based licensing versus permanent FlexNet licensing?
Well, sure.
If you don't have access to FlexNet logs, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about two different things here. Subscription is just a way of purchasing licenses. I mean, if we go back over here to my demo and you go to licenses, I mean, I've got stuff in here that's a 2-year subscription, perpetual, with and without maintenance. Now, as far as license types we monitor, okay, now keep in mind on this side of our tool, on the LAM, we're on the LAM side of the tool here, you can track any asset that you want. Node locked, floating, or whatever. But if you want to track usage, you really need to look at this list right here under tool type. These are the different types of licenses that we can monitor usage on. FlexLM is at the top because 90% of the stuff out there is FlexLM, but this is Reprise, Sentinel, LUM, DSLS, Altium. And I mentioned earlier we can do denial tracking and reporting for Flex, for Reprise, and for DSLS. And the reason is because these other license manager types don't report denials or don't capture denials, so we can't report on them, But we do for Flex, DSLS, and Reprise RLM. I don't know if that answers your question, but they're two different things.
All right.
Yeah, so don't worry about. Yes, the answer to your question is we can monitor subscription licenses just as easily as we monitor perpetual licenses.
Okay.
Any other questions from anybody? If not, I'm going to stop the recording, and I want to thank you all for attending. I hope this has been helpful. And again, if you have